virtual press conference of the Make It Happen in the Philippines campaign. I am Pinky Webb, your moderator for today's press conference. And we are coming to you live from the Makati Diamond Residences and fresh from our campaign launch event just a little earlier. We're all in high spirits and we're happy to be with you. And of course, we hope that you're all doing well. Before we get to this afternoon's main event, we would like to establish just a couple of house rules to ensure that our program will go on smoothly and run on as scheduled. First, we'd like to ask everyone to please change your display names to your company or affiliation by your full name. So it's your company or affiliation followed by your full name, so our online ushers will know how to address you. Please also be reminded that our audio will be muted and your camera feed will be off during the talks to avoid any distraction and unnecessary background noise. And lastly, please send your questions in the Q&A window with your name and publication. Our online ushers will then collect the questions. Since we have a very limited time, we would like to prioritize campaign-related questions. And please note that we will be screening them, of course, to avoid any repetition. You can also press the raise hand button if you want to voice out your questions so our technical team can activate your audio. Again, we are on a limited time, but please just send your questions or press the raise hand button. And if we don't get to address your questions during the program, we'll make sure to get back to you via email. Today's panelists are composed of none other than the distinguished officials of the Department of Trade and Industry. Of course, first off, let's welcome Secretary Ramon Lopez. Also with us, Undersecretary Seferino Rodolfo. And joining us also is Secretary Raul Lambino. So, gentlemen, welcome to our virtual press launch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pinky.
Secmon and I are used to this. Sanay na tayo sa virtual press conference.
Virtual.
Okay, so virtual rather. So let's start. Let's begin already to kick off today's press conference. Let's hear more about the Make It Happen Philippines campaign from Secretary Mon Lopez. Sec, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I hope you caught the presentation earlier. Well, we were just happy to make this launch, to launch this campaign. Make It Happen in the Philippines. It's really an effort to, again, raise interest in the Philippines. Philippines is, again, showing signs of recovery amidst the pandemic. We've been reopening many more sectors, and now we are easing up on other restrictions. We hope to really bounce back from this pandemic. It's really a challenging year, but we're not alone. I mean, the whole world is experiencing this, but at least, thankfully, Philippines has been posting some good numbers in terms of health statistics, despite efforts to reopen safely and gradually the economy. And I guess we are finding that sweet spot that we are able to reopen without really having an outbreak. And we hope to continue with this approach. And with Christmas approaching, and hopefully the vaccines just around the corner, we will be able to support further reopening and even easing up on certain restrictions on age or other sources of market, so to speak, and so that we can really have a bigger recovery in the months to come. But anyway, the Make It Happen campaign is one that should hopefully again remind the world out there that the Philippines is open for business. The opportunities are still very strong. Remember, Philippines was up there before the pandemic. We were the third fastest in Asia, fastest growing economy. The fundamentals are here, and even the population, the market that has increasing per capita income is still definitely having that kind of momentum, especially as we look into 2021 when the dust settles. I guess our economy is geared up for that. So I'll leave it at there.
Thank you, Secretary Mon Lopez. And our media friends are ready with their questions. Let's just to remind you, can also address your questions to Sec Mon, Yusek Perry, and of course, Secretary Raul Lambino. Let's start with Rafi Ayeng from the Daily Tribune. Aside from China, the UK, and the US, what other countries are targeted for investments?
Well, big source of manufacturing definitely would be still Japan, Korea, Taiwan, China. I mean, these are the top countries. Of course, investments from the US and the EU are still very substantial. And these are top of mind. These are the countries that we hope to tap and really invite with this campaign. But obviously, we are open to all kinds and I mean all sources of investments as we are trying to rebuild the economy in these pandemic times.
What makes this new campaign different from other initiatives that enticed foreign investments in the past, gentlemen? Yusek Perry?
Well, thank you
What
very
makes
much.
this different?
Yes, this one is really very focused in terms of the sectors. Although these are just the initial sectors, we're focusing on automotive, on electronics, also on IT BPM, and on copper and nickel-related products. And very particular subsectors of this sector. For instance, in automotive, we are really focusing on electric vehicles. So it's really very focused, targeting on this, and also bringing in the private sector. As we have mentioned earlier during the discussions, it's really government and private sector, the industry working together. We will be deploying teams to assist investors who would like to make it happen in the Philippines. And indeed, even as we speak now, things are happening in the Philippines. Thank you.
Secretary Lambino, can you add something to that, please?
Yes, as part of the investment promotion agencies under the leadership of the DTI and BOI, the Cagayan Economic Zone Authority, which is the agency that manages the Cagayan Special Economic Zone and Freeport north of Luzon, is considered to be the nearest ecozone in the Philippines with the markets in Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and China, which we believe are still the biggest sources of foreign direct investments that may come into the country. On top of that, we are also aggressively promoting the rest of northern Luzon, like for example in the province of Pangasinan, which is a very big province, and with all the modern infrastructure available, it can be easily reached by a 2-hour drive from Metro Manila, and with a highly skilled workforce and highly educated people. Northern Luzon can be a big area of investments to be considered by our foreign investors.
Thanks, Sec Raul. What reform measures are you recommending to be implemented in our bills to be able to spur the influx of FDIs? Gentlemen.
Well, yeah, let me start with, of course, we're talking of structural reforms that will improve like the financial system, taxation system, and incentives. So we're talking of the CREATE bill that should really lower the corporate income tax rate, and at the same time rationalize some incentives, fiscal incentives. But the good thing about the CREATE, it has made substantial adjustments, providing for longer transition period for those enjoying incentives, and it's really performance-based, allowing certain operations, sectors, and companies that are high-performing to be still enjoying incentives. There are other reforms related to the retail trade liberalization as well as public service and utilities that should encourage more investments and, in fact, foreign investments into these sectors and make these industries really attractive.
Sec Raul.
Well, the government's effort on the Build program that was embarked by this administration, we are now seeing the outcome of the effort of this government. In fact, there are so many infrastructure that have been modernized. There are new infrastructure that are being started and being developed. Hopefully by next year, we are going to have more of this infrastructure put in place. And this is what many foreign investors would want to see, the accessibility to areas where they are going to put their capital, and at the same time also, of course, the cost of operations. And when you have modern infrastructure like highways, railways, airports, ports. Example, in CESA alone, we have already started the construction of our two ports, Port Irene and Port San Vicente. And just this morning, we had our board meeting, and we have rolled out several millions of corporate funds for the development of our two ports. This is going to be transformed into an international hub, and hopefully there will be more shipments that will arrive in the CESA coming from these big markets in Asia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and China.
Two ports, Port Irene and
Port San Vicente.
San Vicente. All right, this is from Bernama. What are the incentives that the Philippines will introduce to attract foreign investments under MIH program?
Thank you very much. Actually, that would be under the CREATE bill. What's being discussed now would be more performance-based incentives, including incentives that will heighten the Philippines' advantage in several key factors. For instance, there are incentives under the CREATE bill that would provide for, let's say, 50% additional tax deduction for those who will be investing in, let's say, R&D, in training, and also in terms of employment of actual labor force that would be in the shop floor. And also, for instance, incentives for those who are going to develop supply chains, like for instance, for those who will be sourcing from local communities. So the end goal really is to have a more competitive Philippine industry that will be less dependent in the future on incentives because we are developing the supply chains. That's why it's very important for us to have the CREATE bill passed. And even as we speak now, there are ongoing plenary sessions in the Senate that are discussing the CREATE bill. Hopefully it gets to be passed before the Congress goes into recess this December. Thank you.
This is from our media friend, Gulf Today, Maricar Puyod. May I know when you are going to target investors in the Middle East?
Yeah, we have efforts also in the Middle East. We have a commercial attaché that is really focusing on the Middle East market, both in promoting trade as well as getting investment or investor leads in that area. So, and also we must remember that I think about 2 years ago, even our president made a special visit to the Middle East, essentially to promote Philippines as an investor area.
Pinky, if I may just
You said
add,
please go ahead.
the Philippines Board of Investments, one of our projects in telecoms, this is the laying down of the largest ever network of fiber optic in the Philippines, which continued on even despite the pandemic. 60,000 kilometers of fiber optic network continued to be laid down in the whole country, even during this pandemic. That won the first runner-up in the annual investment meeting in Dubai. So even as we have this health crisis globally, we continue to aggressively make the opportunities known globally, including in the Middle East. So
Very
thank you.
good news, Yusek. The Philippines ranked 5th out of 10 ASEAN companies. In terms of FDIs in 2019, is that good or a bad thing? 5th out of 10. Mediocre?
Well, actually, it's a continuing process. I mean, if you look at the last 4 months, in the time of pandemic, we were posting like over 40% growth. No, May, June, July, August. No, positive FDI. Quite rare in this time. No, for Philippines to be posting that. I mean, we have to look at certain, momentum, and that these are really good signs of. Recovery and confidence in the current administration and in the way the Philippine government is handling the current pandemic and the reforms that we're doing. So the FDI numbers are actually really good, excellent this year.
There's a follow-up to that, Secmon. How do you see this campaign will elevate the country's ranking in this assessment? Make it happen in the Philippines.
Yeah, of course. Especially, again, we're not doing this campaign alone. As you asked earlier, complementing this campaign would be the structural reforms that are being done for investors to appreciate that these reforms will really enable them to realize more benefits in investing in the Philippines. Not to mention also, that's the reason why we're also active in participating in entering into FTA agreements like the recently signed RCEP, being part of a 15-country mega trade deal We're still working on more FTAs, like FTA with Korea, which is ongoing negotiation that will really expand market opportunities if an investor will locate in the Philippines. So, and of course, there are other FTAs and GSP privileges.
From Chris Mundo of PNA, how did you come up? Yeah, how did you come up with the 5 priority areas to be included in the MIH campaign, Yusek?
So as we have mentioned, these are all actually the product of stakeholder consultations. These are among the sectors which we believe would be able to bring in investments. As I mentioned, for instance, in automotive, there's also a special focus within automotives on electric vehicles. When we also mentioned about copper and nickel products, it's about our aspiration on in electric vehicles, because a big part of electric vehicles would be dependent on copper wire. So it's really filling in the value chain gap, also looking at opportunities even post-pandemic. What are the new industries which we think would yield the highest investments?
These are part of the Rebuild program,
Yeah.
where we've identified also in our industrial strategy an approach that will fill up certain gaps in the value chain, because it's not a complete value chain. Some sectors or stages are not being done here. We had to export and then re-import back. No, so we're trying to address those and really encourage certain activities to be done here.
Okay. How do you intend to address the here you said competitiveness of the automotive industry versus other countries? I mean, if you're looking at electric now.
Yes. It's a way by which we can really, because for instance, if we are competing against Thailand and Indonesia in terms of the internal combustion engine, maybe they might be a bit far ahead in terms of internal combustion engine, but when it comes to electric vehicles, we can leverage our strength in electronics. And also electric vehicles as less number of moving parts, plus also our advantage when it comes to copper, nickel, and other products that are needed for batteries.
Time to tap that. Secretary Raul?
Yes, I happen to be the presidential advisor for Northern Luzon.
Right.
And all the raw materials needed for these electric vehicles we're talking about, like copper, nickel, iron, etc., they are all available in Northern Luzon. That's why we have very cheap raw materials in Northern Luzon. We have very cheap lands there available. We have also very cheap labor, but highly educated and highly skilled workforce. So these are some of the advantages that we can offer in our country. Plus, of course, I keep on saying, the modernization of our infrastructure is a must. And the President, it's only this administration that has embarked on a massive modernization of our infrastructure. We'll be able to see the fruits of this labor maybe 2, 3 years, 5 years from now. But all this because of the President's commitment to really improve our economy. So that is one advantage that we are now promoting in order to make in the Philippines happen.
Last question, what is the timeline for this campaign? Is there one?
Even as we speak, this is being launched simultaneously globally, but we see this really as a 5-year campaign.
5 years, so 2020. But you still have to be the DOT secretary.
No.
Di ba?
No, this will continue
Yeah,
regardless of who the secretary
Binibiro
will
ko
be.
lang si secretary. Of course, the election's coming up in the next. Okay, we have one last question from Manila Bulletin, Bernie Magkilat. Are there already investment interests on projects in the 5 priority sectors?
Yes, there are. Even for example, when we talk about copper and nickel products, this December we will be launching the Leyte Ecological Industrial Zone. What it essentially means is that the Make It Happen in the Philippines campaign is actually a communication and facilitation platform that rides on the back of very concrete things that are already happening in the Philippines.
Go ahead, Secretary.
that earlier, in my talk, I mentioned about 90 investment leads that are actually what we consider low-hanging fruits about to be realized in the immediate term. That means within the year or within 1 year. So it can slide to January. But those are 90 leads, and we have identified about 73 other companies that we will really target by next year.
Undersecretary Rodolfo, just parting, your last words, parting message.
Okay. Just as I mentioned, the Make It Happen in the Philippines campaign is really a communications and facilitation platform that rides on what is actually already happening in the Philippines now. Structural reform, industry development programs, and close collaboration between the government and the private sector. So please make it happen in the Philippines. We are here to serve you. You have the commitment of the BOI and all the other closely knit network of investment promotion agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Secretary Raul Lampino.
Well, again, as I mentioned a while ago, with this modern infrastructure being put in place now, and of course the active involvement of all the government agencies, including the local government units. In fact, in my home province of Pangasinan, with the help of the Board of Investment, the Department of Trade and Industry, and the Department of Finance, we'll soon see the birth of the very first economic zone in Northern Luzon, in Pangasinan, outside of the Cagayan Economic Zone. So hopefully, this is going to bring in more investments and more jobs and more opportunities for our people.
Secretary Lopez, please.
Well, yes, as our president also mentioned a while ago in his talk, make it happen in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you. So for the questions that we were not able to answer, please note that our communications partner has collected your questions and will be reaching out to you for the answers. I have to say it was a very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
A very exciting day also. We'd like to thank again the three gentlemen on stage, Undersecretary Perry Rodolfo, Secretary Raul Lambino of the Cagayan Economic Zone Authority, and of course, DTI Secretary Mon Lopez. And of course, also, I'm Pinky Webb. Thank you all, and let's all stay safe.